Hey there, drone fans. Rick here again from Drone Valley. Today, DJI released a major firmware update for the Mini 4 Pro that includes 4 incredibly cool features that really expand the way you can use this drone. Now, I've had a beta version of this firmware for the last couple of weeks, and I've been out flying a lot and testing the software just to make sure everything is working okay. And I'm here to tell you, this is definitely a version of firmware that you're going to want to grab as quick as possible because it provides features that effectively change the way you fly your drone. Now, I'll get into all that in a minute, but normally what I would do at this point is list all the different firmware versions you need for the drone, the controller, the motion controller, the goggles, and the application. But the challenge with having beta firmware is that by the time it's released, because I've had it for a couple of weeks, the numbers might change a little bit, and I don't want to mislead you. So instead of listing it here in the video, I put them down in the description below to make sure you get the latest versions of all the firmware. And the way I did the upgrade was actually use the DJI Assistant 2 for consumer products to upgrade the drone, the controller, and the goggles. The application automatically upgraded as an over-the-air upgrade. Now, by the time you get that firmware update, you may be able to do all of these over the air, but for me, because it was early, I had to do it through the application. But either way, whatever works best for you. But I'm here to tell you, you've got to upgrade all the equipment, especially if you want to fly this FPV, because there's new firmware for the goggles and the motion controller too. That's absolutely essential for them to recognize the drone and for the controller to control the drone. All right, so those will be down the bottom. Now, let me get into the features because, boy, I'm telling you, when you buy a drone, it's got certain features built in. I love a company like DJI that's constantly thinking about how they can expand the use of the drone, what they can do to make it a little bit easier to fly, a little bit more fun to fly, and then release over-the-air firmware that actually changes the behavior of the drone, and that's exactly what they've done with this latest firmware. So the first major feature, and this is mind-blowing, is you can now fly the Mini 4 Pro with the goggles too and the motion controller too, just like you have an FPV drone. And it's not like you're flying a camera drone just using the goggles. It turns it into an FPV drone. And what I mean by that is it unhooks the horizon stable. So when you're flying it in FPV mode with the goggles, it behaves like an FPV drone where it's dipping and swinging around in the air. So it's, again, you feel like you're Superman flying around. And if you fly FPV today, this is incredibly cool on the Mini 4 Pro because this is a camera drone. It's supposed to keep the horizon level and not have the camera jiggle. With this one, when you go in FPV mode, it's actually swooping and swinging just like an FPV drone. And using the motion controller, if you're a camera drone guy like me, using the motion controller too is the most intuitive way to learn how to fly FPV. So I can't wait to get out and spend a little bit more time with it. Now, I haven't tested that feature yet. The very next thing I'm going to do after I finish this segment is head out in the field and fly this thing in FPV. And I'm sure it'll be a little bit janky out there and it'll be a little jittery, but I want to show you that it works. The next feature that I think you're going to find really cool is a feature called Vision Assist. Now, that was released for the Mavic 3 products a while back, and essentially what that does is use the obstacle avoidance cameras to give you a view on both sides of the drone front and back when you're flying. And the reason that's kind of helpful is because if you're flying sideways, you're sliding sideways following a subject, you can't really tell what's off to the right. And even though you have obstacle avoidance, it'd be nice to see what's going on over there. So Vision Assist actually uses those obstacle avoidance cameras to show you what's on either side, front and back when you're flying. And I'll show you that one as well. The next one, which I think is pretty cool, is the 360. It's called Active Track 360. And again, that came out in a couple of other drones as well. But essentially what that does is it's active track, and you can automatically tell it to circle you and fly around you. So you get these beautiful sweeping cinematic shots of the drone covering you as you're walking through a field. It almost looks like you've got a helicopter up in the air with a professional camera crew trying to keep you in the center of the frame. And I'll show you that one as well. And then the final one seems like a minor thing, but it's a really big deal. You can now turn off the downward vision sensors. And why would you want to do that? Well, if you've ever tried to land a drone on a moving object like a boat that's maybe floating in the bay, it's really difficult to have that drone settle in on the floor of that boat because those downward vision sensors are there to protect you from landing in tall grass or banging into something when you're landing. So turning those off means that you're now in complete control of the drone. By the way, when you turn those off, you also turn off obstacle avoidance, and that drone's going to come down really quick. So you've got to be very careful when you're landing it, but trying to land it on a moving object has been near impossible with this brand new drone because it's protecting you against yourself. Well, now you can turn those off, and I'll show you how to do that as well. So if you stay tuned next, I'm going to head outside. We'll fly this a little bit FPV, then I'll come back in and we'll talk about the other features. One of the coolest features that DJI has made available with this new firmware is the ability to fly your Mini 4 Pro with the goggles too, or the Integras, and the motion controller too. Now, I haven't tested this yet, but I've downloaded all the firmware I need to actually fly the drone using the goggles, and there's a lot of firmware.
You've got to update the drone, the controller, the goggles, the application. So there's a lot of things you have to make sure you get right. But do all those firmware updates first, and then go out and fly your drone. Now, I haven't flown it yet using this, and I'm not an FPV flyer by nature. I'm definitely a camera drone guy, but I love flying FPV, but I'm a little bit jinky on it. So let's see how it goes. Anyway, I've got the drone connected. I've already checked and authorized it. I'm going to start a recording. Yep, there we go. All right. Now, to start the drone, you're going to tap this button twice, and that'll spin up the motors, and they're spinning. Okay, so we've got a connection and it's working. And now I'm going to lift off. Here we go. Drone's up. Okay. All right, let's see now. Boy, I tell you, I'm already getting vertigo. Let's see, get it up in the air a little bit higher. That's kind of scary. There we go. Up we go. All right, cool. All right, so we'll fly into that. Let's fly into that field a little bit there. We'll go this way. Now I've got it in regular mode, not sport mode, because I'm prone to crashing into stuff when I get into sport mode, as evidenced by my loss of the Air 3 a while back. But oh boy, this is pretty cool. It's flying just like an FPV drone. I mean, if you didn't know this was the Mini 4 Pro, I'm sorry I'm being a little shaky here. I'm just trying to get my bearings. But if you didn't know this was a Mini 4 Pro, you'd swear you were flying the FPV. And I think this is absolutely incredible and so much fun. It's such a different experience. It feels like you're strapped to the camera in the drone. All right, let me try and land it. This is going to be an interesting experiment. All right, here we go. Coming in, coming in. Now, there's no way I'm going to land this thing looking at FPV, but we'll give it a try. All right, I'm going to run into myself here. Boy, wouldn't that be funny on camera? Rick smacks the drone right into his own head. All right, I'm looking down. Got to go a little forward, a little forward. All right, I still think I'm a little off, but let me give it a try right there. Oh boy, I can't tell. I'm looking through the goggles. I have no idea. Boom, right in the center of the mat. That's better than me flying a camera drone. Anyway, very cool experience. It works 100%. Now, I'm gonna spend a lot more time flying it using the FPV controller because I gotta get better at it. Quite honestly, that was some pretty shaky footage there, but man, that's so cool. That is absolutely cool. So if you own the goggles too, or the Integra, and you own the new motion controller too, get out there and fly your Mini 4 Pro, because that experience is so different than flying a camera drone where it's locked into a horizontal position and it's constantly saving, you know, that motion. It's taking that motion out of the flight. With FPV, anybody that flies FPV knows it's a completely different experience, because it's like you're Superman up there in the sky and you're zipping along like this and you're flipping around, and boy, oh boy, I didn't even try any kind of flipping stuff yet, but I'll get to that, don't worry. Anyway, that's the portion of the firmware that I've tested so far, and it works spectacularly. So get out there and fly your Mini 4 Pros with your goggles and your motion controller and have a whole lot of fun.
I hope that segment was helpful, and I'm still having a hard time wrapping my head around the fact that through a simple firmware update, DJI was able to magically transform my camera drone into an FPV drone. And it wasn't just a camera drone being viewed through the goggles, because the big difference between a camera drone and an FPV drone is the level horizon, that stable footage. So a camera drone is going to constantly struggle to keep the image stable and keep the horizon level. An FPV drone doesn't care about any of that. An FPV drone is going to dip, and it's going to weave, and it's going to fly smoothly through the air. And if you saw the footage coming through those goggles, that's exactly what this looked like. And the reason it can do that is because the profile that DJI's created inside the goggles, when it connects to the Mini 4 Pro, changes all the parameters inside the drone to effectively transform it into an FPV drone. So there's a lot of engineering that went on there, and I can't wait to get back out in the field. And I know that footage was shaky because I don't fly that often as FPV, but I've got this controller, I've got plenty of fresh batteries. I'm going to spend the next 5 or 6 batteries out in the field learning to fly FPV a little bit better. All right, so that's the first feature. If that wasn't enough, there's still 3 more coming. So the next feature is called Active Track 360 Automatic Mode. And I'll show you that next, but this is a feature that I think you're going to use all the time, and it's really a professional feature that doesn't belong in a drone this small. That's a feature that belongs in the more expensive, higher end, more complicated drones. And again, somehow DJI's introduced it into the Mini 4 Pro. So stay tuned and I'll explain that one next.
This next feature is definitely going to be one of your favorites. It's called ActiveTrack 360 Auto, and it's like a souped up version of the original ActiveTrack 360, where that program allowed you to define 2 virtual circles around you, one in close and one farther away, and you had complete control through the application on how high the drone flew in each one of those circles and how far away from you those circles were. So once you made those definitions in the application, once you put the drone up and you were in ActiveTrack mode, you could have it run parallel or trace you. But while it was tracking you, you could sweep your finger along the screen and have the drone follow those motions. So you could have it behind you and swing along the right-hand side and elevate to its second height. You could have it swing back down along the left-hand side. It just opened up a lot of cinematic possibilities. Well, what this new mode does, called Auto, is it makes those decisions for you. It's a lot like Master Shots, where all you have to do is turn on ActiveTrack, hit the auto button, and start walking. And it's gonna make decisions on, should it follow you? Should it do a helix? Should it come back to a follow? It's going to create this cinematic reel. It's almost like you've got a director in a helicopter with an entire camera crew making decisions on what the best angle is to take a shot of you from the air. So I think it's absolutely amazing. Now, a couple of things. You have control in the application over a lot of the parameters, and I want to show you that first. But the second thing I noticed is there doesn't seem to be any rhyme or reason to it. So I've done this walk 4 or 5 times, and every time it's decided to do things in a different order. So there's some type of artificial intelligence going on inside the application that's making those decisions. But I'm telling you, every time I did it, it was unbelievable. It was like somebody else was flying the drone as I was walking through the field. And I think it's going to be a great feature that a lot of people are really going to like. So let me show you the settings first. So I'll start a screen recording real quick so I can capture that. All right, to start with, once you get into the application, on the upper right-hand corner, you'll find 3 dots. Tap those. That'll bring you to the main menu for your settings. You're going to want to tap Control, and then right at the top, you'll see an option for subject scanning. I recommend you turn that on, but you can't turn it on until the drone's in the air. But what subject scanning will do is it's actually drawing a wireframe representation of you from the drone's perspective, which gives it a lot better tracking ability. So always turn on subject scanning if you can. And then below that, you'll see an option for focus track settings. That's where you want to go. So tap the right caret. And then once you're in that, you have a choice between tracking a person or tracking a vehicle. We're going to track a person. I'm a person. And then you have a choice of where those inner and outer circles live. Now, in my case, the inner circle is at 16 feet, so it's pretty close. And the outer circle is at 32 feet, a little further out. Then if you go down even further, you'll see inner height and outer height. So you can actually set not only how far away from you those circles exist, but where the drone's going to live in those circles. So in my case, I've got it set for 5 and 9.5. Now, you also have a choice for camera motion, so I can have it fly normally, or I can have it fly quickly between those different points. So if I change my mind, or it decides to change its mind in auto mode, it's going to move quickly or it's going to move slowly. I found that the quick motion tends to be a little unsettling. It's nice, but the smooth motion with this normal one actually does a better job of sweeping in nice and smooth. It gives you a really buttery smooth motion. So I like that normal. And then down the bottom, there's another option which I turn on as well. It's called near ground flight. And what that'll do, normally the drone won't come down close to you to the ground because it's worried about obstacles. If you turn that on, the drone can come down a lot closer to the ground. So it's a little bit more interesting because it gets closer to the ground than ever before. It's like 2 meters off the ground. So here I've got trees and fences and poles, and even though I have obstacle avoidance, I'm not going to take the chance. So I'll leave that off. All right, so I think we're ready to go. I've set my parameters. Now to start this, we'll take off with the drone. Rotors are up. Drone's in the air. All right, let me walk out here a little bit to get this guy out of the way. Now, first thing I'm going to do is put it up, spin it towards me. Let me get it up a little higher. Great. And then it's going to see me, and I'll go into, I'll draw a box around myself. Okay, it sees me. Now I can turn on ActiveTrack by tapping that button. And the minute I do that, I have 3 choices. I can be in trace, parallel, or auto. Let's put it in auto. And then I'm going to hit go. And now it immediately starts following me. So if I move, it's going to move with me. See how it's backing up? Now here's the interesting thing. If you look in the top of the screen, right now it's in follow mode, but it's going to change its mind in a second and move to a different mode. Oh, it's going to circle. So it's coming around this side. See how it's circling me? I didn't do anything. I'm just walking around the field. I have no control over this. So it's going to circle, now it's coming back to follow. Eventually it's going to change to something else. So what I love about this is that it's making the decisions for me on how best to track me, how best to follow me. And in this case, I'm still in, oh, it's going to helix. So there's a cinematic shot. Now imagine you're out in the field, you've got some beautiful landscape behind you, and you put this in auto mode for Active Track 360, you're gonna get these beautiful shots. Look at that shot right there. Now it's not like I can't do that on my own. I can certainly do that, but it's hard sometimes when you're focusing on a subject to create those cinematic moments, and especially if you're a new flyer. So if you're a new flyer with the Mini 4 Pro, these features, this type of artificial intelligence inside the drone, really gives you, boy, this guy is really having some fun up there, really gives you a lot of control. Let me turn this off so I can keep an eye on it here. I should probably watch that. So I'll stop that. Good. So I guess what I'm getting at mostly is that Active Track 360 was unbelievably cool. It was a feature that actually changed the game for drones because DJI is a company that goes ahead of everybody else with new features, and they've been slowly integrating a lot of artificial intelligence into their drone programming, which makes it so much more fun to fly because even though you can become an excellent pilot, and most of the shots that I do, especially the important ones, I'm on the joysticks and I'm flying that drone in, but I love features like this because what this does for me is on a beautiful day like this, I've got a field over here with a horse in it, I've got some corn over there, I can just turn it on, hit auto, start walking down a path or driving my car, and it's gonna decide, let's make this an interesting reel for Rick. Let me start off with a follow, let me move to a helix, and we'll move to a circle. Again, the artificial intelligence makes those determinations, but then it puts it together in a reel that just delivers incredibly cool video footage. So I think it's wonderful. It's almost like there's a miniature pilot inside the drone with the steering wheel going like this, like, oh, let's get this shot over here. This would be better from this angle. Let's get on this side. I just think it's absolutely amazing. And the coolest part, and I'll say this every chance I get, you got this for free. It's a firmware update. So you bought the drone, it didn't do it, now it does it just because you did an over-the-air firmware update. I think that's absolutely amazing.
How cool is that feature? Now I'm going to be using that an awful lot, and I think it's amazing that the drone can be smart enough to actually keep you in the center of the frame and navigate that automatically to give you those sweeping cinematic shots. It almost looks like you've got a helicopter in the air with a professional camera crew centering you in the frame and doing those shots from either side. I mean, I'm going to be using that an awful lot when I'm flying in camera mode. Now, the next feature is a safety feature. It's called Vision Assist, and this is something that was introduced with the Mavic 3 a while back. And essentially what this feature does is use the obstacle avoidance cameras on both sides of the drone, front and back, to give you a view of the approaching landscape to either side. So if you're flying this direction, this set of cameras here will give you a view of what's coming this way, and that's important so you don't careen into a tree or a wall. Believe me, I've gone into trees, so knowing something's approaching is really important, and that's really good when you're in an environment where there's a lot of obstacles that you may bump into. Now, I know you have obstacle avoidance in the drone, but still, if you're flying in sport mode, you don't have obstacle avoidance, so knowing you're approaching a wall or a tree gives you that time to get up above those trees so you don't smack into them. So stay tuned and I'll show you how that works next.
Vision Assist is another incredibly cool feature that DJI has added to the Mini 4 Pro with this latest firmware update. And they actually introduced this feature to the Mavic 3 series a few months ago, and I'm absolutely blown away that it's now available on the smaller Mini 4 Pro. Essentially, what this feature does is it uses the obstacle avoidance cameras in the drone to provide a secondary view in your direction of travel. So for example, if I'm tracking a subject across this field to the right, I'm completely blind to the stand of trees over here to the right. Now, if I have obstacle avoidance turned on, it'll notice the trees and pull me back, but that'll ruin the shot. Or if it's a small obstacle or I'm flying in sport mode, obstacle avoidance won't help me. So what Vision Assist does is provide a view of that oncoming hazard, and I can see it in the small screen on my display right here, and I can elevate above those trees smoothly, save the shot, and not introduce my drone to those trees. And I think the feature is absolutely cool. So I'll show you how it works in a second, but there's two things to keep in mind. Number one, it's going to be a black and white image, and that's because the obstacle avoidance cameras are not high quality, they're not color, so you're getting a view from those obstacle avoidance cameras. The second thing to notice is how shaky the image is, because those obstacle avoidance cameras are mounted on the body of the drone. There's no stabilization involved. The only camera that's stabilized is the one pointing right out the front of the drone because of the 3-axis gimbal. So that's what the image would look like if you didn't have a gimbal on the drone. Anyway, I'm going to put the drone up and I'll show you how you can view the direction you're traveling. You also have the option of redirecting your view to the front, back, left, or right by using the display. So let me get the drone up in the air. Let me start a screen recording real quick. All right, we're good to go. Okay, drone's up. Now, one thing really quickly, the actual display doesn't come on until the drone's up in the air. So it was kind of blank, and now you can see it in the lower left-hand corner. Let me fly forward a little bit. Kind of windy today, so this is going to be an interesting flight. I'll take it over to the left. Now, You'll notice in that display in the lower left, actually let me make it larger. Now you can see the display. It's got the left arrow on because that's the direction I was flying, and you can see I'm approaching those trees. Now watch when I head right. All of a sudden the other camera comes on and I'm watching right. How about front? Can I go front? Yep. See the arrow change to the front? Now I'm seeing exactly what's in front of the drone. And notice how shaky that is. And again, because there's no stabilization involved, that's showing you how much that Mini 4 Pro is fighting the wind. Now the cool thing is I can actually switch those cameras by tapping the screen to whatever view I want. So if I'm setting up a shot from there, I can get a look around to see how close I am to those trees. And as I get closer to them, you'll actually see a yellow band come up. So it's gonna warn me, if I'm not paying attention to it down there in the corner, that hey Rick, pay attention because you're about to crash into some trees. So that's Vision Assist in a nutshell. And again, I know it seems like a small feature, but if you fly a lot in crowded environments like this, or if you're in a place where there's a lot of obstacles, having a second co-pilot, keep an eye in the area around you who's about to fly into that tree or whatever, is a really big thing. So I think it's a great feature they've added. And actually, when I think back to flying the Inspire 2 and the Inspire 3, they actually have a co-pilot camera mounted on the drone. So you've got the main camera that the cinematographer is using, and you've got a co-pilot who's actually flying the drone that has a secondary black and white camera that they can look at when they're flying around to avoid the obstacle. So essentially, you're getting the same feature in the Mini 4 Pro with Vision Assist. And I think it's absolutely amazing. And the best part is, they've added it to a drone you already own. All right, so let me land the drone.
This last feature that's introduced with the new firmware may seem like a small one, but to me it's a really big deal because if you've ever tried to land a drone in a boat that's on a bay that's kind of drifting, it's almost impossible to land it because the downward vision sensors look at the area below the drone and it's going to see sidewalls on the boat, a seat, a cooler, maybe your feet, and it sees all those things as obstacles, so it's not going to let you land. So you're going to end up hovering up here trying to get that drone down. So being able to turn off those downward vision sensors means it ignores all that. But it also turns off the obstacle avoidance, so you've got to be very careful when you're landing you don't smack into the sidewall of the boat. But I like the fact that I can turn it off because it'll ignore all that stuff below it, and I can put the drone down and land it where I need to land it. It's also helpful if you're trying to land in a field and maybe there's a lot of tall grass around you. It looks pretty far outside of the landing zone, and it may see some tall grass over here that there's no chance you're going to hit, but it still won't let you land. So it allows you to turn off those downward vision sensors, and it couldn't be easier to enable this feature. The first thing you're going to want to do is go into the main menu, and in the upper right hand corner you'll see 3 dots. Tap those, and once you tap those dots you'll be in the main menu for your adjustments. You want to make sure you navigate to the Safety tab, and on the bottom you'll see the Advanced Safety Settings label. Click the arrow to the right of that, and then scroll down to the bottom of that page and you'll see Vision Positioning and Obstacle Sensing, and there's a toggle right there. So if you turn that off, then you'll be in that unprotected mode where you can actually land on a moving object. So again, only use that when you need it, but I'd leave it on all the time. But when I'm out in that boat and I've got to land that drone, and it's happened to me multiple times where I'm like, oh my gosh, how am I going to get this drone? It won't come down inside the boat because it sees everything as an obstacle. I've got to reach up and grab it, and I'm not a big fan of hand catching. So this eliminates all those dangers by allowing you to land it in the boat. And that's pretty much all I had for today. So for me, I love the fact that DJI is constantly thinking about what they've produced, and their engineers, their wizards, the Dream Factory people are thinking about what can we do to enhance the functionality of this product. Let's release firmware that introduces these kind of features. I think it's absolutely amazing that, again, you bought a product that had a certain feature set, and over time, new firmware comes out that allows it to do things it couldn't do when you bought it. Especially things like turning it from a camera drone into an FPV drone. To me, that's just unbelievable. And that's what DJI did with this newest firmware update. So download the firmware. I'm here to tell you it works just great. You're going to love it, and you're going to have so much fun flying this thing as an FPV. And that's it for today. So thanks an awful lot for watching. If you have any questions about anything I've covered, drop those in the comments below. I promise to get back to you as quickly as I can. I will be testing the original motion controller and the original goggles to see if those work. My suspicion is they won't, but I'll test them and let's see what happens there. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel, what are you waiting for? Hit that subscribe button down there because we have so many cool clips that are coming this year. We have a lot of high-tech stuff we're going to be reviewing, and there's a bunch of drone stuff coming too. I can't say too much, so you definitely want to be here to hear all about it. So thanks again for watching, and until next time, as always, happy flying.